Hey, so you want to build a smart home, huh? Well, you come to the right place. I am starting this first video out with kind of going through what is Home Assistant and why do you want it over some other options. Um, Other things that I'll be going over is kind of some basics of Zigbee versus Z-Wave versus Wi-Fi. We'll also be going over kind of things to avoid, certain things that maybe you should look out for, some best practices, and then I'm gonna eventually follow up with some future videos where we'll kind of take this to the next steps, right? So, to get started, um, I'm gonna pull up my next or my Home Assistant here. So I I stumbled on Home Assistant a couple of years ago. I was doing well, I've been in Discord for a while doing different I don't know, help desk situations basically where I hang out on different servers and learn about the technology and then help others with it, right? So I stumbled upon Home Assistant and I had already had a couple of Hue bulbs and the little Hue hub and got that connected. And oh man, now I can talk to Siri and get my lights to turn on or off and that was great. It was a nice little introduction. And then you start going through Costco or Sam's, or you start looking on Amazon and you see all these different devices, and it they're kind of thrown at you. There's not necessarily this best way to do things. You can't just, go online and say, "Oh, what's the best smart home stuff, whatever." We know of HomeKit or we know of like Apple Home because it comes with our iPhones on our or an app on our iPad or Mac. There is Alexa, which is honestly pretty powerful, but it's made by Amazon, and certainly some issues there. And then there is Google Home, right? So, but these are more, and again, Google Home. You have your Google, what do they call them? All the different little smart speakers, right? And now they even have like the Nest Hub where you can actually do some neat stuff with those and put like a Home Assistant dashboard where you would um, put some of your like most useful things to be able to turn a light on or off um, or see a camera stream, that type of thing. But we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. So let's jump back and let's talk about what Home Assistant is and why it's useful for us. So, Home Assistant is an open source home automation platform, I would call it. So, it's software. You can buy some dedicated hardware that they've produced, but it's not really well, okay, we'll just go through them. So you have Home Assistant Blue, which is an Odroid N2 plus something along those lines. It's a little single board computer, credit card size little computer. It's powerful enough to run Home Assistant for basic use case. Then now they've developed the Home Assistant Yellow, previously called Amber. If you've been paying attention at all, they had to rename it due to some drama that I won't get into. But so the yellow is actually using a Raspberry Pi, but not your normal Raspberry Pi. It's a CM4, a Compute Module 4, and then they've built a um, custom PCB, right? So like a board that the CM4 Raspberry Pi device sits on top of, and that allows you to connect a couple of USB devices. It has a slot for a solid state drive and an M.2 solid state drive. And then it also includes a Zigbee slash Matter chip, which is useful for some of our smart home devices. For example, Hue and IKEA are two very popular hubs, and they have a bunch of smart home devices that are all Zigbee, right? So again, getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So we're gonna jump back. So Home Assistant is this really neat software that allows us, and we can run it on various devices, right? Well, we can do a whole video dedicated to that. But it's this really nice software that allows us to run it on our home network. We got to have a device to run it on, and it's able to magically find all these devices on our network and allow us to integrate them and have them work together. So one good example is the Unify Protect, which are the unified cameras, and then the unified network uh, devices are able to be integrated. So, for example, a unified doorbell, right, or the G4 Doorbell Pro, if you were lucky enough to find one when they're in stock, and then so you have that doorbell, but then maybe you also have a smart TV, for example, a NVIDIA Shield TV, which is an Android TV, right? You could also have an Apple TV, uh, or maybe LG built into your TV, something like that, right? So what Home Assistant allows us to do is integrate all of our different devices. So for example, the doorbell and the NVIDIA Shield. Well, when someone rings that doorbell, I am able to use Home Assistant to take a picture of who, whoever's in front of the doorbell whenever they ring it, and then actually display that on an NVIDIA Shield, a smart TV, or send a notification to my phone. And then you can go a step further and you can integrate a lock that's not made by, NVIDIA Shield or Google or anyone, and it's not made by Ubiquity, which is who makes Unify. Instead, the door lock could be a Z-Wave or a Zigbee lock. And then when you send that notification to your phone, it actually pops up and, gives you it's called an actionable notification. Again, something that we'll revisit in a future video. And so, whenever someone rings my doorbell, I get a notification on my phone and a pop up on my screen on my TV if the TV is on, showing a picture of who's there, and then I will, on my phone at least, I will actually have the option to click unlock. So if it's someone that I'm expecting over, then I can, or even if I'm not home, wherever, I'm able to just click unlock right then and there. I don't have to tell Siri to do it. I could, but don't have to tell Siri to do it, or go manually go unlock it after, doing the uh, answering the notification for the doorbell. So it's very powerful, right? And some other things that let's kind of give some other examples. So we talked about Hue and IKEA devices. So if you have a Hue hub, you're able to you boot Home Assistant, right, into for example, Home Assistant OS, which would run on like a Raspberry Pi, and it magically finds all these different devices on your network, including Hue. And so it says, "Oh, hey, new device found. Do you want to set this up?" And you click yes, and sometimes it might need a username and password for authentication. And next thing you know, boom, you now are able to control your smart bulbs from within Home Assistant, which is very, very powerful. So this is just a simple example, right? I mean, this is bringing in a couple of bulbs, or hell, 40 bulbs, 50 bulbs, right? You end up getting in a situation where you have multiple hubs, though. Maybe you have, uh, a Hue hub. Maybe you have a IKEA Trad-free hub, or Trad-free, I think it's called. Uh, Various different hubs. Maybe you have some old smart home devices like Smart Things, which could be Zigbee or Z-Wave. Uh, Maybe you're just getting into it, right? So what we're able to do with Home Assistant is there's a couple different technologies that we need to learn about, right? So everyone knows Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is ubiquitous with smart home because people think, oh, well, I got a Wi-Fi doorbell or this. Well, yes and no. There are Wi-Fi bulbs, and there are use cases where a Wi-Fi bulb would be a good option. So, for example, let's say that you're trying to save a few bucks or more than a few bucks, instead of buying a $40 to $50 Hue RGBW CCT bulb, which RGBW CCT means that not only is it the red, green, blue, all the the colors, but it also allows you to change the color temperature, um, which some people might know that as Kelvin. So that would be changing it to where like your brightness is kind of a bright white, cool color they call it, or a warm color where it's more of a orangish kind of mellow color. And so a Hue bulb is $40 or $50 for one of those, for one. And let's say that you have a chandelier that's with four bulbs in it. That's $200 just for one chandelier if you wanted RGBW with color temp. So and Hue calls that ambient, if you weren't aware. So what you can do instead is buy some cheaper bulbs, for example, a Wi-Fi bulb that has RGBW CCT. And one example would be the at-home bulbs, and I'll put links for all of this stuff in the description below. But these bulbs are somewhere between $10 and $15 a piece, if depending on if you want 7 watt or 15 watt for the bulb, or GU10 or candelabra, a few different options. But we're able to so there's a benefit and there's a reason why sometimes you might want a Wi-Fi bulb. But let's say that we got a two-story house, and our hub might be off on the left side here, and then we're coming way over here outside where we want where we don't have a good Wi-Fi signal, or just maybe there's a shed around. So another option is to get into, instead of Wi-Fi, to get into Zigbee and Z-Wave, or should I say Zigbee or Z-Wave, would be the more popular option. So Hue, right? Very popular smart home bulbs. IKEA, very popular smart home bulbs. These are not just bulbs; they make motion sensors that are great, and very remotes, nice little battery-powered remotes that are nice. Hue and IKEA, very two popular options that are actually running Zigbee. So Zigbee is a protocol. These days we're looking at Zigbee 3.0, and it's and at some point I'll get into Matter and Thread. For now, we're just gonna act like it doesn't exist because well, firstly, the devices don't really exist. If you go and try to Google Matter bulb, or Matter IoT bulb, or Thread IoT bulb, you might find one or two options, right? So we're kind of we're kind of still at this weird pivot point where there's some new options that are going to be coming out that are great for smart home users. But even once those options are out, it's not going to change our current setups, right? So for now, we're going to ignore Thread and Matter. Just know that it is something that in the future will be useful to us. So we have Zigbee and Z-Wave to uh, choose from as far as our IoT, our Internet of Things mesh options. Now, that's not to say the Wi-Fi is not important or useful. It is. We need to have a good Wi-Fi network. We certainly might have some Wi-Fi bulbs, but for now, Zigbee, Z-Wave. So these both have some caveats, right? So for Zigbee, one of our we'll go with pros first. Zigbee devices are for the most part cheaper than Z-Wave devices. This is specifically true for bulbs, but also light switches and certainly sensors. And by sensors, I mean a motion sensor, a temperature, humidity. A lot of times those will have a lux sensor built in, which is the brightness, the amount of lux. So or amount of lumens, I believe, yeah, you would say. So you can you can think of Zigbee as kind of a cheaper option, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's worse, right? So Zigbee is cheaper. One thing that Zigbee has going for it is there are a lot more devices. So if you were to search Zigbee light bulb or Zigbee RGBW bulb, you'll see the IKEA, you'll see the Hue, you'll see Singled, SENGLED, you'll see many different brands. I mean, just on Amazon, or AliExpress, or your favorite uh, retailer, Banggood, if you use that. So We have low price, we have high availability because the actual amount of devices is large. And let's see, there's really quite a few other positives, but let's go ahead and jump to negatives. So on the negative side, we have Zigbee protocol and Zigbee Pro are Wi-Fi 2.4. So if you're not a technical or a networking guy, Wi-Fi 2.4 is a band that has just had a bunch of stuff thrown in it, right? So we have our actual Wi-Fi devices on Wi-Fi 2.4. We use channels 1, 6, and 11 for those because the bandwidth is far enough apart. And we won't get too technical with our networking, but basically 1, 6, 11 is where we will have our Wi-Fi 2.4 gigahertz channels on, and then we'll use HT20 as the bandwidth, and maybe in a future video I can go over networking more. But then we have Zigbee. So Zigbee channels are actually different than Wi-Fi channels. I'll have to throw a link in the description below to a nice little chart that kind of shows where they fall. What I've decided to do is go for Zigbee channel 25. Zigbee channel 25 is the farther, it's on the very edge. So you have, I don't remember where the channels start. 11 to 25, I believe. And certain Zigbee devices will only want to join on channel 15 or above. And channel 25 is kind of that sweet spot to where, from what I've read and talked to different guys in Discord, channel 25 does not have any devices that say no, I will not join on that channel. And there's no way for your Zigbee stick, your coordinator, to broadcast more on and talk to devices on more than one channel, right? So and if you change channels in the future, you will have to repair all of your devices, which, if you have 40, 50, 200 devices, that's a lot. And if they're battery powered, you might have to go hold down a reset button. So that could be rough, right? So with Zigbee as our negatives, we have it on, it's in that Wi-Fi um, band, or the 2.4 gigahertz band. Uh, Another negative is not all devices so there's a Zigbee alliance. They might have renamed it now with Matter, but there's you can for I'll put it this way. Or I'll give you an example. There are certain devices that you buy Zigbee. Maybe you move into an old house that already has some devices, and you just join them to your mesh, and next thing you know, you have light bulbs that aren't turning on like they used to when you walk into a room and the motion sensor turns on. And you do some troubleshooting and you come to find out that a few of your these old devices, or even if it's a brand new bulb or a motion sensor or something that you join on your network, is black holing routes, right? So the way that a mesh works is you have your USB stick or coordinator of some kind, and that is uh, kind of like you're building out a mesh, right? So imagine, a bunch of different little dots on the screen. So and I'll actually pull up and show you what mine looks like. Uh, so if things are not super close to, for example, a bulb is not super close to where the USB stick or coordinator is, then another bulb or a light switch or whatever you have that's Zigbee will be able to it creates a mesh and will be able to kind of allow it to hop. They call them routers, aka repeaters, and some devices will actually black hole a route. So this bulb knows that it needs to go from here to here to here, and this first hop from here to here, this is black holing it. So even though the bulb is technically working, whatever its parent is, whatever its next route is somehow a router is somehow not properly sending that information along the mesh. So You certainly do have to, make a conscious decision about which devices that you put on your network, because not all of them are going to be just work TM, right? So okay, so let's see. We did a couple of pros and cons for Zigbee. We'll go ahead and do one more pro and then one more con on it, and we'll move on to Z-Wave. So one more pro is that Zigbee does something called binding. Binding is a way to take, for example, a smart light and a smart light switch and bind these together so that even if Home Assistant is down, you're able to still use your light switch to turn on and off your light bulb because these are bound together. Now, Home Assistant can still see whenever the switch is pressed and whenever this light's turned on. So we're still able to control them with our smart home. But at the same time, even if everything goes down, maybe you have a catastrophic failure, maybe your cat knocks your Raspberry Pi off the shelf and who knows, right? Um, we'll still be able to use our light switches and light bulbs. So that's good with binding. However, the downside with binding is certain devices are not able to be bound or not able to be bound period to other devices to get the functionality that you want. As a good example, you cannot have a door slash motion sensor, or I'm sorry, a door. You cannot have a door slash window sensor um, binded to a light bulb. And the reason for that is there are different clusters, at least for Zigbee to MQTT. I believe it's a similar reasoning for ZHA, which is built in the Home Assistant. But basically there's something called a gin on off cluster, and if both devices don't support that same cluster, then you can't link to it, right? And the reason why you'd want to do that is, let's say you have a smart bulb in a closet, and let's say that closet doesn't have a light switch. All it has is a little pull string, right? Well, first of all, if you pull that pull string and turn the light off, then when you come back into it the next time, the light's got no power. It can't turn itself back on. So that's not really a good solution. So you have this smart bulb. Well, then the smart bulb needs to have something to tell it to turn on and off, right? So you can buy a little, for example, an Akara door and window sensor, and it's basically just two little things that sit like this. They're just a little bit far apart, and they have a little magnet in them. And when the magnets get close enough, it knows that it just considers it closed or open, right? So that's the friendly name that we see in Home Assistant. So I put one on a coat closet, and when you open the door, it knows it's open. When you close the door, the two contacts are close together. If I can do that, there we go. And your light bulb will then go on and off based on an automation that you create, right? So and that might sound scary. It's not. Very, very simple to create an automation in Home Assistant, and that's certainly something that I will show a tutorial on. I can maybe do like a little YouTube short on it, but it's probably something that I'm gonna go through and kind of show you. Okay, varying levels of this is the super simple way to do it. This is a slightly more complicated way, and this is the oh my gosh, I have some extra time. I want to do this really cool thing, and that'll be kind of our advanced option. So now we have Z-Wave all figured out, right? The demystified, if you will. So we're able to take our Hue bulbs and our IKEA bulbs and all our various Zigbee devices, and we're able to bring those into Home Assistant. Now, the way that those are brought in is via a Zigbee coordinator. So a coordinator is a little it's most of the time it's a USB stick, and that'll be plugged into like your Pi or something. We'll actually be plugging that into a USB extender because the USB ports and this was a really interesting thing to learn. The USB ports on our Pi, on our PC, especially USB 3.0 ports, actually cause a crazy amount of interference. And you might have even noticed this whenever you plug in a USB dongle for a mouse, for a wireless mouse, right? And you notice that, wow, all of a sudden you put it in, you're only a foot or 2 feet away from your PC or your laptop, and all of a sudden there's still all this, your mouse doesn't work right. Well, a lot of these mouses now, or for years now, they've come with an adapter to where you actually put the USB dongle for the mouse on an extension cord, right? So we're doing the same thing. We're trying to avoid interference on our mesh network. So we end up buying a little USB extender. I mean, 5 foot, 8 foot. I use a 10 foot, and I've had good luck with that. So we use a USB extender, and then either a USB dongle, or you can also buy like PoE extenders, right? Or I'm sorry, a PoE coordinator. So where this would be useful is, we're talking about building out a mesh, correct? So a mesh needs to have various nodes all around to be able to route through, right? So you don't your mesh isn't going to be in a straight line, and it can't be too far apart. So sometimes you might have your server or your Pi or whatever it's running Home Assistant on back in a corner. Maybe it's in a basement, where there's just not a whole lot of signal able to go through a big concrete wall, whatever it may be. So in these situations, if you have a decent wired network, then you're able to take a USB coordinator, or I'm sorry, a PoE coordinator, and basically our USB stick is now going to instead be plugged in the Pi over USB. It'll actually be connecting to Home Assistant over the network, right? And so this way we can kind of put our coordinator in a more central location. So now our mesh starts in the middle and then branches off to the sides, right? Instead of maybe starting on the side and branching all the way around. So, or branching out. So that's a very useful option, and the most highly recommended that I'm seeing online is by a guy named Tube, Tube, and I'll throw a link to his devices below. It is something that is often out of stock, and it's not the cheapest option. I mean, his PoE coordinator, I believe, is $78, 70 something, and it's out of stock very often. And this is because these are small batch. He's actually 3D printing a little, you know, uh, enclosure, and he's making them himself with an ESP32 and a custom PCB he made. And he's even, he's not. I don't know if he's. I don't know if I'd say that he's writing firmware from scratch, but he's contributing to the firmware, so to make it work properly. So Tube is certainly a good, or one of his PoE coordinators is certainly a good option, or I say one of, I believe there's only one. There's also the Electro Llama. There's a few options, and I'll throw a link to all the suggestions below. There's a Zigbee to MQTT supported devices, or supported adapter, uh, not cheat sheet, but go-to list, if you will. So that's everything Zigbee out of the way. Now we have Z-Wave. Z-Wave might be, I wouldn't necessarily call it more popular. However, I would say that it's very common to find Zigbee devices in new builder grade homes, right? So you have, say you move into a new house, or a house that's built in, the past 5 years, maybe 10, I don't know. Uh, there might be a package from alarm.com, and it has this nice little, it has some door. It's not a Ring doorbell. It's not an Ubiquiti Unified doorbell. It's some Sky something or other doorbell, right? And your locks are some brand that we're not super familiar with, or it's not necessarily a Schlage, right? Or maybe it is, or a Quickset or something. And then you have some light switches, and they might have this cute little app. When I say cute, it's probably going to be very bare bones, right? So there might be various devices in your home that you move into that are already smart, and you just don't realize what they're actually doing behind the scenes, right? So a lot of times these will be connected to a hub, and guess what? There's Z-Wave, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Z-Wave is one of the pros of Z-Wave, right? Is it's not on that 2.4 gigahertz band, which Wi-Fi and Zigbee Pro, Thread, and Matter will also be on the same spectrum. So Z-Wave runs at 900 something megahertz, right? Not sub gig, which is useful because it's able to pierce through walls a little bit better and whatnot. However, downside to that is, guess what? Low bandwidth protocol. Yep. So that means that your devices can actually flood the network if they are too chatty. So you end up with in a scenario where maybe you have a Z-Wave mesh that just has a few devices on it, and maybe only one or two of them are a wired device. So a Z-Wave wired device, similar to a Zigbee wired device, would be a repeater on the network, right? So that's able to repeat the signal to allow devices that are further away to have a strong signal. Um, if you have a small mesh, or even if you have a large mesh and you get, say, a Z-Wave energy monitoring, or a plug, like a smart plug, or I don't believe there are any Z-Wave smart outlets. You'll just have to look online. But if that's reporting, every second, every couple of seconds, that could easily lag your network, your mesh, to where turns out now your motion sensor in your bathroom is delayed by 3 seconds when you walk in. So you walk in and you're looking up at the light saying, "Hey, are we turning on anytime soon?" Not great, right? So for Zigbee, that's something that we certainly need to look out for. And what we can do is we can change what's called parameters to where we can have, say, a 5 minute reporting interval instead of a 5 second reporting interval. And again, each parameter, there's no set thing. This is per device made by the manufacturer, right? So in our manual for whatever devices we have, that's where we will be able to see all of our options, right? So now we have Zigbee and then Z-Wave. Well, what are some other things with Z-Wave? Well, Z-Wave can do how Zigbee did binding. Z-Wave can do direct association. And one benefit to direct association is there aren't as many devices that fall into a I can't bind this with this category. Now, there still are some. I believe I read today there might be an issue with binding, or excuse me, associating certain devices to a smart water meter, or sensor gauge, and that's something that I'll just have to follow up on. Feel free to ask questions below, and I'll do a search on Discord and tell you exactly what I'm talking about there. Uh, but yeah, I mean, Z-Wave, because of its lower bandwidth, is sometimes a better solution, or at least a another solution. With that being said, I had problems with Zigbee when I first started out, or excuse me, I'm sorry. I had problems with Z-Wave when I first started out, and a lot of other people do too. However, that's not to say that it's on Z-Wave. It's just a a protocol that is more susceptible to failure if you do certain things wrong, or if you don't take certain precautions. So a lot of people swear by Zigbee, and you'll end up in a situation where you might find a bunch of really good looking Z-Wave light switches, and then you go try to find Z-Wave bulbs and you get a couple of options, especially for RGBW, where that also does, color temp. So Then you look at Zigbee, and I can find probably 20 different types of bulbs and light switches that I'm able to bind together, so it works even if Home Assistant's down. And that's a pretty big downside to Z-Wave. Is Z-Wave has what's called the Z-Wave Alliance, and the Z-Wave Alliance is not cheap. I want to say it's like $10,000 for a company to begin buying, or I'm sorry, to give to the alliance to kind of buy in, right? I mean, they have to get like, you can't just say, "Oh, I'm Z-Wave," and put a sticker on the box. No, they actually have to adhere by certain standards. And again, I'm not an expert at this, but just from what I've read online, there are a lot more hoops to jump through if you want to be a Zigbee device, or excuse me, a Z-Wave device, and be able to put that sticker on it and sell it, right? So, and there's also and as another caveat, you cannot DIY a Z-Wave device versus if I wanted to make, I have these wait, these LED strips here and here that I made. These are Wi-Fi running WLED. Uh, However, I could buy a Zigbee controller, and for example, Gled Opto is one, and I could connect the strips to that, and I would be able to join those to my Zigbee mesh. I could then bind those to a light switch along with other bulbs, for example. The that bulb is a Hue bulb. The one above me, also a Hue bulb. I can't do that with Z-Wave. I cannot make my own LED strip with Z-Wave. So that could certainly be considered a hindrance. So yeah, so I mean, at this point we've kind of discussed a little bit of Wi-Fi, Zigbee, and Z-Wave. So let's kind of recap on, or let's kind of revisit Home Assistant, right? So I wanted to make sure that we understood what some of our options were, because you got Wi-Fi, Zigbee, Z-Wave. Those are our three main ways for us to bring in, and well, a fourth way would be wired, right? To bring in all of our smart home devices. So now this is where Home Assistant comes in, right? So first we need some smart devices. We need the bulbs. We need the sensors. Now we have Home Assistant. So I'll give you a really good example of where Home Assistant shines. I am able to take. I have a bathroom, right? So in my bathroom, I have two bulbs. I have and there's Zigbee bulbs. I have a Z-Wave light switch, and it's a two-in-one light switch. So it actually has a little bottom button that does that uses a separate relay in it for my bathroom fan, and then I have a recessed door sensor. So I had to drill a hole in the door, and I had to drill a hole in the wall, and this is a Z-Wave, a AOTech recessed AOTech 700 series recessed door sensor, and that works the same way as the door slash window Zigbee sensor that we talked about earlier does. Basically, it knows whenever they're close and whenever you open the door, it's far away, open or closed, right? And then I also have a Apple HomePod Mini inside the bathroom. So what I'm able to do with Home Assistant is I have a couple of automations set. I have automations for on and off when you turn the lights on or off manually at the light switch. And that light switch is actually running in smart bulb mode, which means when I turn the button on or off, it's not killing power to the bulbs. It's actually telling the bulbs to turn off, right? Via Home Assistant, via Zigbee, because they're Zigbee bulbs. So technically, Zigbee to MQTT is the driver that I'm using. So I am that's how I'm able to turn my lights on or off. And then those automations, or so I have those two automations. Then I also have a 4-in-1 motion sensor in there, right? So it's a Z-Wave, a Zeus ZSE40, I believe, and that is a 4-in-1 motion, temperature, humidity, and lux. So what I'm able to do with that is report humidity and motion. I'm able to, well, temperature and lux, right? I'm able to have an automation set up to where it can, because I have that smart switch for the fan. If the humidity detects a spike, I can have it automatically turn the fan on. So if I jumped in the shower and I forgot, it'll do it for me. I also am able to walk in the door, and this is where, you know, you can do some really neat stuff with Home Assistant without having this crazy amount of coding knowledge, right? And I can certainly share the code uh, below, which I will do. So what I do is I walk in the door and it turns the lights on because motion is detected, right? If I shut the door, it knows now that the door is shut because the recessed door sensor. So if I'm using the restroom, or if I'm in the shower and the door's shut, lights are on, no problem. When I open the door again, now the knows that the door is no longer closed. So if it doesn't see motion anymore, it will turn the lights off. After 30 seconds, I believe, maybe a minute. There's Lila. Hey Lila. Hey pup. Hey girl. Good girl. So motion, right? But then with our door sensor, but then let's say that we're in the shower and let's say that we leave the door open. Well, motion's not going to be detected anymore. And you don't want to take a shower and all of a sudden the lights go out. So what we have is the HomePod Mini. If I'm playing music on that, which I turn on before I get in the shower, I do it manually, but we could set up an automation for that. Just call it shower time or something and invoke it with Siri, right? Uh, if music is playing, even if I forget to shut the door or if I choose to leave it open, maybe I want the humidity to go around the house because it's winter, right? And no one else is home, or I'm behind the shower curtain, I'm safe. Uh, then the lights will not go out because even though there's no motion detected, our state of our media player is playing. So Home Assistant knows that we're most likely in the shower, or not most likely, that it just assumes that we're in the shower and that we don't want to turn our lights off. So then once I am done taking a shower, I turn my music off or I switch it back to my phone, and then if motion's not detected again, well, guess what? Lights go out for us. So that's a really interesting scenario where we're able to take multiple different sensors and from I'm using two different Z-Wave sensors. I'm using a Z-Wave light switch, but I'm using Zigbee bulbs. Those would never talk to each other without Home Assistant. But now with Home Assistant, heck, I could have and the HomePod Mini, right? That wouldn't talk to everything else. Now we could do a very simple thing in automation inside of Apple's HomeKit, to where turn the lights on when music is playing or motion or something like that. But there's no, short of like writing your own code with the Apple Shortcuts app. There's really no way to do it what we did, right? And this would assume that you actually have HomeKit support for all these devices. These Z-Wave devices that I have, uh, don't support HomeKit, so they wouldn't be able to, talk to HomeKit. However, I have these devices added to Home Assistant, and guess what? Home Assistant has HomeKit controller. HomeKit controller allows me to take any device I want, or even a virtual device, for example, just something that I create in Home Assistant, like an automation, and I can send that to HomeKit, and then it can I could create a leak sensor to where if my humidity is 90% in somewhere, then in a closet, then start beeping, right? Now there's better ways to do that, of course, but you could. So you know this is Home Assistant. It's a way to take all these different devices, bring them into one. Some people call it a smart home hub, but Home Assistant's really not a hub. Home Assistant is a smart home automation powerhouse that allows us to use open source drivers like Zigbee and Z-Wave and bring all these devices in and then have ultimate control over them. And just one thing, we'll circle back to we were talking about Hue devices. So with your Hue devices, you have a Hue hub. Well, guess what? That Hue hub, they now have stuff called Friends of Hue, right? So that means that not only can you pair Hue devices to that hub, but you can also pair Hue Friends of Hue devices that are also running Zigbee, or that are also using the Zigbee protocol, to that hub. But you might end up in a situation where there's other Zigbee devices that you buy that aren't supported by that hub. However, if we switch from the Hue hub, so my Hue hub is now in a drawer, and I really enjoy my Hue bulbs and I really enjoy my Hue motion sensors. But I was able to take the all my Hue bulbs, all my Hue motion sensors. I have two of the Hue dimmer remotes, which also work really well and have a great battery life. And I was able to add all of those to Zigbee to MQTT, which you could add them to Zigbee, or you could add them to ZHA as well, which is built in Home Assistant. It's another option. And now, whenever I add new Zigbee devices, I just have one big mesh, right? If I had Hue and the Hue hub, and I wanted to add Zigbee devices that weren't supported by that hub, I would have to still get another dongle, a Zigbee dongle, or a Zigbee PoE coordinator, yeah, a USB coordinator, or a PoE one, and then I'd have two separate meshes. Well, guess what? Now we have Wi-Fi 2.4 gigahertz and two different Zigbee all fighting over the same band, plus future thread matter. Not a good scenario. Not to mention, now you're having to build out what? Two different Zigbee meshes and maybe a Z-Wave mesh and Wi-Fi 2? Nah, I mean, well, and Wi-Fi 5, right? And heck 6 if you have some new devices. So that's not really a good solution. A much better solution is to take control of your devices, add them to get off of these custom boxed in hubs, and you know build our own mesh. So with that, I don't want to keep this too much longer. I really hope that you enjoyed everything. Again, this is my first YouTube video, so I'd really appreciate any kind words, but also any criticism. I'm sure that I said too much, and I'm sure that I said so too much, and I know my lighting sucks, and my camera's only at 1080p. So there's some certain constraints, but I'd still appreciate any any feedback. Constructive criticism and feedback. Thank you again for watching, and this is Smart Home Sellout.